The Trump administration discussed strikes against Iran amid the largest protests since the Islamic Revolution of 1979. The Ayatollah's regime was indeed shaken. In addition, the internet has been shut down in the country, making it very difficult to verify various information. Several sources claim that, as of now, more than 2,000 people have died as a result of the protests. Innocent civilians are being killed by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, specially formed militant squads, and intelligence services, including their unarmed operatives. So far, everything is unfolding according to the scenario of the Romanian Revolution, which led to a regime change in the country and the decision to execute Ceausescu and his wife Elena. As is known, the Iranian authorities are preparing to flee through Mineralny Vody. Iran's gold reserves have been taken out, as previously reported in several videos by the source. In response, Iran issued a warning to the American administration, clearly stating that retaliatory strikes would be carried out against American military bases if the United States decided to intervene in the ongoing internal conflict. Meanwhile, America demonstratively carried out a series of strikes on ISIS targets in Syria. It is reported that the American military carried out large-scale strikes. Strikes were conducted on Islamic State targets across the entire territory of Syria. This information was confirmed by the U.S. Armed Forces Central Command. The attack was part of a significant military operation called Falcon Eye Strike, which began back in December of last year, the year 2025. As stated by the United States Armed Forces Central Command, our message remains absolutely firm. If you harm our soldiers, we will find you and destroy you in any situation. Points of peace. According to a report from CNN, at least 90 precision-guided munitions were used in total during the operation, striking more than 35 targets overall. At least 20 U.S. Air Force aircraft participated in the attack overall. Meanwhile, according to the Wall Street Journal, citing information from its sources, the White House held internal discussions about possible strikes on Iranian territory in order to support protesters. Among the options that were discussed was a combined airstrike on specific military targets located within Iran. Nevertheless, there is still no unified position in the White House and the National Security Council regarding actions in Iran. The agenda is being formed, it has not yet been finalized. As the Wall Street Journal writes, such consultations, according to industry experts, are considered to be a part of the standard strategic planning procedure. At the moment, there are currently no signs of strikes being carried out on Iranian territory. At this time, being recorded. Mass protests have already rapidly spread to several hundred different cities. The available data regarding the total number of casualties varies greatly depending on the source. In particular, the human rights organization Rana reported that there have been at least 65 deaths so far. Time, the American magazine, reported that at least 217 people have died in central Tehran alone. Sources report that there are currently overcrowded morgues in the city of Tehran, as well as in several other locations throughout the country. Nevertheless, due to the ongoing lack of reliable and stable internet connectivity, at the moment internet access is operating at approximately just 1% of its normal capacity across the entire nation of Iran, making it virtually impossible to verify or confirm any final or definitive information. It is reported that at least 9 children's deaths have been officially confirmed. At the same time, the publication Iran International, citing its own sources, reported that in the past 48 hours, at least 2,000 people have died, though this figure has not yet been independently confirmed. Meanwhile, there are also reports that morgues in the city of Rasht are completely full, and in Tehran, a very serious problem is already being felt as bodies are being brought in an endless and continuous stream. Tehran authorities have declared all participants in the ongoing protests to be moharebs, that is, enemies of Islam and enemies of God. There are a large number of casualties not only among the protesters themselves but also among the security forces, in particular members of the paramilitary organization known as Basij, which is reportedly involved in the killing of peaceful citizens. In addition, it is reported that in the city of Hamedan, a security officer was stabbed and police officers were killed in the cities of Bandar Abbas, Gilan, and Mashhad. A number of international airlines that previously operated flights to Iran, including Lufthansa, Fly Dubai, Qatar Airways, and Turkish Airways, have suspended all flights to the country. The protest now has a unified face. It is reported that a significant portion of the protesters in Iran are monarchists. Reza Pahlavi, the crown prince and son of the last Shah, who was forced to flee Iran at the end of the 1970s, is currently the most popular figure of the protest movement. However, he is not the only one. A large number of cities have been swept by protests, at least 190 so far. It is reported that the whole of Tehran has essentially also become a battleground. Fighting, killings of protesters and law enforcement officers are taking place in dozens of districts in Tehran, particularly in Punak, Shahrara, Sadat Abad, Janat Abad, Madanhaft, and Tahrir. On Firdaus Boulevard and in several other areas as well, significant unrest has been reported. In Kermanshah, large parts of the city have fallen out of the control of the central authorities, and fighting in the Dar-e-Drij and Gelangar districts continued with high intensity until the early hours of the morning. In Mashhad, police stations were attacked. In Malorad, a police lieutenant colonel was killed, and it is reported and confirmed that at least 110 people have died. Specifically in Tehran, there were 40, and in Rasht, another 70. Once again, I repeat, there are major problems with the morgues. There is simply nowhere left to store the bodies of the dead except for the monarchists. A separate wing of the protesters is represented by Kurdish parties, in particular the Democratic Party of Kurdistan and PJAK, which also played their part. And the representatives of the Azerbaijani population also play a certain role. Yes, there is an Azerbaijani minority, and in the north of Iran, they are called that, let's say, so to speak. But it's actually quite hard to call them a minority. We're talking about at least, well, people estimate 33 million individuals. These are Azerbaijanis or people of Azerbaijani origin who go to and live in Iran, so as a percentage of the total population. The situation is such that this is how things are shaping up here. All the problems, both national and economic grievances, as well as grievances against the regime. In addition, videos are circulating online showing protesters dousing images of Iran's rulers, particularly Ayatollah Khamenei, with flammable liquid and setting them on fire. In response, Iran is threatening the United States with attacks on American military bases. This was reported by the Financial Times. In particular, the words of Majlis Speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf are specifically cited, who clearly stated that in the event of an attack on Iran, American military bases, as well as those military bases that are located within the territory of Israel, will become legitimate targets for retaliatory attacks. Meanwhile, President Donald Trump is still making promises. He promised the demonstrators that help is on the way, to reassure them, and freedom is closer than ever before, and he wrote that the USA is ready to help. However, up to this point, things have not really progressed beyond making statements or declarations. In addition, Lindsey Graham, who is a United States Senator and a member of the Republican Party, also made a promise to the protesters that swift and decisive American assistance would indeed be provided to them. Unfortunately, for now, everything is limited to just words, unfortunately, because right now is actually a very convenient moment to overthrow the theocratic power in Tehran. This is exactly the kind of situation that could be taken advantage of. And if it turns out that the Americans do not intervene at this critical moment and the autocratic regime manages to suppress the protests, it is absolutely clear that disappointment and hatred will be directed primarily at the United States. Once again, when they had the opportunity to overthrow this regime. In addition, the Americans are in no hurry to make contact with Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi, fearing they might back the wrong figure. Previously, the Americans have already been burned more than once by betting on one figure or another who ultimately did not come to power. For example, this was the case with Guaido in Venezuela, as we remember. At that time, the Americans did not dare to carry out an operation, although it was quite possible against the backdrop of the rigged elections, which of course were falsified by Maduro's regime. And in the end, as we can see, they still had to carry out that operation to abduct Maduro anyway.